This week I come to you from outside South Bloc, and South Bloc has one of the important offices of the External Affairs Ministry. And the focus this week is on the man, the big man inside the External Affairs Ministry, and that's our Foreign Minister, Subrahmanyam Jaishankar. I'm Pallavi Ghosh, and there's a reason why this week's One Take focuses on a man who now has emerged as a hero. And this has been largely because of two important incidents which have taken place in the last few days. The normally reticent, low-profile, former diplomat, and one who felt that his actions should speak more than words, like any diplomat or a bureaucrat says, but now has become our External Affairs Minister, has actually stood out because of two comments he made. One, a stinging attack on European countries where he showed a mirror to them. And the context was a question which was asked of him as to why India is actually importing oil from Russia. Now, in this entire Ukraine-Russia crisis, we know that Russia has emerged as a pariah as far as America and many of the European countries is concerned, but not for India, because India has decided to take a balanced stand. We have a long-standing old relationship with Russia, and while we have given humanitarian assistance and stood by Ukraine, India doesn't want to give up on its old friends. So when he was asked this question as to why India is still importing oil from Russia, even though at a discounting rate, this is what he had to say.
We do buy some energy which is necessary for our energy security, but I suspect, looking at the figures, probably our total purchases for the month would be less than what Europe does in an afternoon. So you might want to think about it.
He showed the mirror to many of the European countries, saying that you import oil from Russia so many times a day. That's an Indian External Affairs Minister showing it back as far as the world is concerned. That's one point. The other, in the light of several important political developments or some other developments taking place in our country, US spoke out against what they called a human rights violation of India. Now, what Jaishankar retaliated by saying that they were entitled to their views, but we have our views on your views, and US also has a lot to say as far as their human rights violation is concerned.
People are entitled to have views about us, but we are also equally entitled to have views about their views and about the interests and the lobbies and the vote banks which spread. I can tell you that we will not be reticent about speaking. We also have views on other people's human rights situations, including that of the United States, especially when they pertain to our community. And in fact, we had a case yesterday.
Once again, Jaishankar gave it back to America. Those who think that India cannot stand up to superpower, this is where you have it. But just to go back to who this Jaishankar really is, you know, he's also had the privilege of, and I would say the honor, as he would often say, of working with several prime ministers, not just the present prime minister. He was also with Dr. Manmohan Singh when he was the prime minister. He played an important role as far as the framing of the Indo-US nuclear deal is concerned. His negotiating power, his quiet but determined style of speaking to foreign countries, making the point to them that India is not a third world country, that India can stand up and does stand up to superpowers, and we decide who our friends are going to be. His negotiation power, if you remember the Devyani incident which took place in US, he actually negotiated with the backroom talks he had because of the many advisors, many friends he had as far as America was concerned, and India was able to wriggle out of what was then seen as an embarrassing situation. He's also a master of several languages. He speaks Russian very fluently, apart from his home state language of Tamil, in Hindi, English, a bit of German, a bit of Japanese, Chinese, Hungarian as well. And perhaps the fact that he's able to speak Russian so fluently explains why India has been able to negotiate with Russia on a discounted oil imports from them, and also make it clear to Russia is that we are not going to be one of those countries which takes an either or stand. We are going to feel for Ukraine, but at the same time not give up on our friendship with Russia. Now, one of the few features you would have first noticed of Jaishankar was by the side of Sushma Swaraj when she was External Affairs Minister. He was that quiet, solid pillar of support for Sushma Swaraj. They actually enjoyed a deep personal bond apart from the professional respect he had for her, and he often went on record to say that. I still remember when Sushma Swaraj expired and her death anniversary had taken place, he came out with a very poignant as well as emotional tweet. Sushma Swaraj was the External Affairs Minister, as we all know, and he took over eventually. What was it that the Prime Minister saw in Jaishankar, who was actually just a Foreign Secretary, as many would say, his critics initially would say, and he was a career diplomat? Prime Minister watched him very, very carefully. In fact, one of my sources tell me that the way he negotiated with the Chinese ensured that the Prime Minister was able to meet the top brass of the Chinese, the big ticket appointments which were sought, which were given, and which was also a trademark as far as Sino-India relations are concerned, impressed the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister also, sources tell me, is a man who wants people to work on the basis of the action and not words. Jaishankar fitted the bill, and therefore he was handpicked as the Foreign Minister. It was a surprise phone call which went to Jaishankar to become the next Foreign Affairs Minister of our country. It was an interesting anecdote also, which I was once told, is that Jaishankar was actually called up and told by the Prime Minister that you're going to be the Foreign Minister. You have lots to on your platter. We have to show to the world that India is not and will never ever be subservient. Atmanirbhar Bharat is going to be our calling card. Jaishankar got his brief and he said, "We'll do it, sir." That's the brief which Jaishankar works on. Those who work with him very closely inside South Bloc says that again, he's a man of very few words. He comes in the morning to his office with an agenda, with a clear mind, and therefore he tells his staff, he tells his colleagues that this is what I want, this is my mandate, and we want to work because we don't want to showcase our work. Our work should actually be our profile, should be our kind of a portfolio. Now, the challenges before Jaishankar and our government are many. Now, India is at that threshold where we want to talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, where we want to talk about being self-sufficient, self-reliant, but at the same time, we do depend on many other countries when it comes to our imports, and oil being one of the most prominent of them. The world over is seeing a lot of turbulence. There are sides which are being demanded. There's this whole diktat that India and every other country will have to pick their side. And especially the so-called third world countries which do not fit into the slab of being a superpower or being those developed countries. That pressure certainly mounts on countries like India. But India has decided to stand up for itself. We are also surrounded in a neighborhood by a lot of turbulence, whether it's in Sri Lanka, whether it's in Pakistan, a bit in Nepal, and a bit in Bangladesh as well. Came as no surprise when Jaishankar decided to visit Sri Lanka in the midst of the economic crisis that the country is facing. It also comes as no surprise that he, along with the Prime Minister, prevailed on the fact that we have to bail out our country, our neighborhood. And that is also because India has a deep cultural, personal connect with Sri Lanka. The fact that he's a Tamil and several Tamilians are settled in Sri Lanka, in fact, work on the economy, could be also one of the reasons why Jaishankar understood the importance of helping out countries in crisis, and especially if they happen to be in your neighborhood. As far as Pakistan is concerned, a word of caution from a former diplomat, now turned minister: don't trust anybody. It's important to have the communication channel going, but at the same time, we must also be on our guard. But I think the biggest test of diplomacy in the recent times has really been the Ukraine crisis. On one hand, several Indians have settled down in Ukraine, they work there, they study there, and the biggest challenge which our country faced was how to get them out. On one hand, you had Russia breathing down your neck, and also the neck of several other of their allies and friends, that you have to take a stand, you have to boycott Ukraine, you have to condemn Ukraine. India decided you cannot do that, because if you do that, one, it could be seen as a humanitarian violation, But the second important thing is, what about our people who are settled in Ukraine? How do we bring them back? The entire process where our ministers were sent there, they supervised the coming back of the Indian students through other routes like through Hungary or whether it was through Poland. This was something which was supposed to have been the brainchild of the Foreign Affairs Minister, along with, of course, the big support and cooperation coming in from the Prime Minister. But the challenge actually began after that. When the humanitarian crisis was somewhat over for us, in the sense our students began coming back and they all came back and settled down over here, the next crisis was about Russia. Putin certainly would want India by his side completely, to completely criticize Ukraine. That's where the diplomatic skills of Jaishankar came in. Jaishankar decided that no, it's not going to be either or. And he had the complete support of the Prime Minister, and in fact he supported the Prime Minister also on this. We've continued our equations, our relationship with Russia. Prime Minister interacts, communicates with Putin, and also prevailing upon him that please ensure that there is no humanitarian crisis. India's option of opting for discounted oil from Russia, there was a lot of deliberation behind it. And that's the reason why Jaishankar was able to show the mirror to the world, saying that you are no one to point a finger at us because you're no different. In fact, we are not a two-faced like you. Jaishankar, as I said, is multilingual. His father, K. Subrahmanyam, has been a strategist, and he understands what strategy is all about. He also understands the strategic nuances. Jaishankar, of course, is a pass out not just from St. Stephen's College but also from Jawaharlal Nehru University, where he also mastered as far as nuclear strategy is concerned, and this is another feather in his cap. As I said, he also knows several languages which always come in handy when you travel abroad. His wife also is a Japanese, so that's where his worldview, as he often says in private, also comes across. Is Jaishankar the man to watch out for? Is he the best pillar before the government at a time when India is looking out, looking globally? And is he indeed then the right choice? Hasn't South Bloc got strengthened? And hasn't South Bloc, which houses not just the External Affairs Ministry but also the Prime Minister's office further down, not been strengthened by this man who is low profile, who is reticent, but who can show the mirror to the world that India can stand up? Do give in your reactions. Thank you so much for watching.